week 4 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few wide receivers I mentioned this week. The first guy, Terry McLaurin, Washington Commanders. So Terry McLaurin, a lot of people took him high in their fantasy leagues here. And so far, he's been pretty solid. He hasn't had that one monster game, but in PPR leagues, he's had double-digit fantasy days the first 3 weeks. Week 1 versus Jacksonville, 2 catches, 58 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 with Detroit, 4 catches, 75 yards. And then last week, 6 catches, 102 yards. A lot of garbage time, though, versus the Eagles. So right here, week 4 at the Dallas Cowboys, it's going to be a tougher matchup here. So I'm figuring Trevon Diggs is going to be on McLaurin in this ball game, and we're going to see if Carson Wentz is going to have time. I know last week he didn't have time to get the ball down the field to Scary Terry, but he still went over 100 yards. Like I said, a lot of garbage time in that ball game for Terry McLaurin, though. And this week at the Cowboys, I think it's a stiffer matchup where he's going to have a good corner on him, even though we know Trevon Diggs is all or nothing. He goes for that big interception or whatever. But right here, he's going to keep him in front, I think, in this ball game. And like I said, if McLaurin in those first few games doesn't get garbage time or touchdown towards the end, he really hasn't done anything. So this week here with a pretty tough matchup at the Cowboys, he's a wide receiver I would shy away from. The next guy is DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. So it's been a downfall for DJ Moore in the first 3 weeks of the season. And I'm not going to blame DJ Moore for it mostly. It's going to be on Baker Mayfield not getting him the ball in the right places, and him and Baker not having the right rapport or being on the same page. So the weeks here, week 1 versus Cleveland, 3 catches, 43 yards. Week 2 with the Giants, 3 catches, 43 yards, a touchdown. And then week 3 in a matchup you thought he would do some damage versus New Orleans, 1 catch, 2 yards. So right now, I know it's not a tougher match up versus the Arizona Cardinals, but there's no way you could trust DJ Moore in this ball game. He's not getting the targets, really, 6-7 targets a game, which is horrible, but isn't great as well for a number 1 wide receiver. And he's not putting up fantasy points. He's even been dropped in 3% of fantasy leagues, which I think is a little bit too far. But there's no way you could play him. Right now, you sit him on your bench, see if he breaks out, and hopefully he can, because the next few weeks here, the schedule isn't that easy. Week 4, Arizona, pretty decent matchup. But week 5, San Francisco, their secondary is pretty good. And week 6 at the Rams, that's a pretty tough matchup as well. So right here, DJ Moore, it's been a tough sledding for him early in the season. And right now, there's no way I could trust him, especially if I adjusted my roster a little bit and got some guys on the wire to start in his place. The next wide receiver is Jerry Judy of the Denver Broncos. So a lot of hype with Judy over the last few seasons coming in. But right now, he's only had one big game to show for it, week 1 at Seattle. 4 catches, 102 receiving yards, and a touchdown. And to be honest, in that ball game, he broke a tackle and ran down the field for 60 yards. So if he doesn't do that in that one, he has a mediocre ball game. Then week 2 versus Houston, he left early with an injury. 1 catch, 11 yards. And then week 3 versus San Francisco, that was a defensive matchup and an offensive struggle and a tough game for both offenses on Sunday Night Football. 2 catches, 17 yards. So right here, week 4, yeah, it's a plus matchup on paper at the Vegas Raiders. But the only guy I really like in this game on the Denver Broncos side at receivers, obviously Cortland Sutton, who I said in my receivers to start this week, is a guy to start this. Jerry Judy, 2 poor games in a row. Week 4 here, him and Russell Wilson haven't been on the same page. And to be honest, besides Sutton, Wilson hasn't been on the same page with anyone. So it's struggling the last couple weeks here is Jerry Judy. He's a wide receiver I would shy away from this week and bench. The next guy is Brandon Ayuk of the San Francisco 49ers. So Brandon Ayuk, he's had a couple decent ball games here and there, but nothing eye-popping. In PPR leagues, yeah, he's had 2 out of 3 ball games with double digits, but nothing great, like I said. And he's got a pretty tough matchup versus the Rams here in week 4, even though we saw Hollywood Brown go for 140 yards, but a lot of garbage time in that one as well. Week 1 in Chicago, 2 catches, 40 yards. Week 2 versus the Seahawks, 5 catches, 63 yards. And week 3 at Denver, 3 catches, 39 yards. And the touchdown saved his day. So right here, week 4 versus the Rams, this ball game, a division matchup, obviously, in the NFC West. It's going to be a tight, contested ball game. And I think we could see a low type of scoring game like we did last week. Not as low with Denver and the 49ers. But this week here, Brandon Ayuk, PPR leagues, that's barely making it right now. And this week here with a pretty tough matchup versus the Rams. I think could get to Jimmy Garoppolo a few times in this game and make it tough, especially with Trent Williams out rushing the passer here. I think it's going to be a tough ball game for Brandon Ayuk. And he's a wide receiver I will bench this week, and the fifth and final wide receiver I will bench this week is Gabriel Davis of the Buffalo Bills. So I was big on Gabriel Davis coming into the season. Week 1, had a great ball game, 4 catches, 88 yards, a touchdown. Week 2 at Tennessee, he sat out with the ankle injury, and then he returned week 3 in Miami. 3 catches, 37 yards, 6 targets. So the troubling thing here for me is a lot of Isaiah McKenzie we saw. Obviously, Stephon Diggs, he's the alpha wide receiver over there and number 1 guy. And Gabriel Davis, he only saw in that ball game 6 targets out of 63 pass attempts by Josh Allen. I know he dropped one in the end zone with tight coverage on him on a jump ball in that third quarter of that ball game. But right here, week 4, I know it looks like a pretty decent matchup at Baltimore. We just saw them give up 156 receiving yards to Devonte Parker in their week 3 ball game versus New England. But right here, a lot of weapons on this Buffalo team. And right now, it looks like Gabriel Davis in week 3 was the odd man out a little bit. I'm not saying he's going to have a bust type of game, but after the workload we saw from him, even though he was on the field the majority of the time, it's a little concerning. And maybe he's not 100% with that ankle. And like I said, Josh Allen has tons of options. And to throw the ball 63 times and your number 2 wide receiver supposedly to only get 6 targets, that's not a good sign for me. So this week here, if I have better options, I would bench Gabe Davis. So that's a few wide receivers I will bench here for week 4 of the fantasy football season.